record. It's going through there, get it. I mean, audio setting. Oops, wrong one. I did. Okay, to speak. I thought I went to there. Okay. Well, I guess I won't know until you try it again. But anyway, because nobody's on. That's okay. Well, it doesn't even need to. Anyway, good morning. I don't know what started. I heard somebody here talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and I don't know if Pastor mentioned it in the sermon. Did anybody see if anybody wants, I'll send it to them. Is that in Germany at a Lutheran church? They did an AI sermon, and the pastor there set it all up, ran it through artificial intelligence. In case you don't know what it is, artificial intelligence is people program all this information into computers. Like if you do map directions on your, smartphone, and you say, from Lake Havasu City to Kingman, in a matter of 2 seconds, it tells you how far it is, what the driving time is going to be based on the traffic, and it tells you everywhere to turn. A matter of 2 seconds. That's artificial intelligence. Somebody has that programmed in. So anyway, what people do for artificial intelligence on anything, but in this case, the sermon, he just says, write me a sermon about. That's all you got to give it, pretty much. They did the whole liturgy. And you did it up on the screen, and they had, it wasn't like they had holograms up on the chancel, but that's next. But they had the little cartoonish pictures up on, preached the whole darn sermon. Well, I didn't listen to it. I was just reading the article. Everybody seemed pleased, but most of those Lutheran churches in Germany are pretty apostate anyway. So, the main thing in the headline was that it told the people not to be afraid of dying. Not to be afraid of dying. That's what the headline. Yeah, you can't. Anybody wants it, I'll email it to you. Anyway. What? Well, I don't know. If it's got the Bible in there, I've seen some stuff. I've seen some people do some stuff, not necessarily sermons, but do some stuff with artificial intelligence that it comes out. Well, you'd have to listen to one. I don't know what they actually did. I'm not criticizing it or praising it. I'm just saying this is where we're going. Yeah.
So artificial intelligence. A guy's on an airplane and he gets his knee rammed into by the drink cart, by the serving cart. So he goes to an attorney, and the attorney presents his brief, but he asks AI to put the brief together. Did you read this story?
No, I've heard of similar.
Okay. So when he submitted his brief, there were 4 quotes of previous cases on file, which didn't exist. The judge threw it out.
Wait, so it was done by a lawyer. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And they're just in the beginning stages of it. It's kind of scary. I'll say one thing is, if you ever get a chance, Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan. Everybody know Joe Rogan? Oh yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Elon Musk was on there probably 3-4 years ago. You figure Elon Musk is all into this stuff. He was telling Joe Rogan he's scared to death of artificial intelligence. So he should be his target. Okay. So we're at the very end of chapter 4. We left off from the last 2 verses. We were finishing up Adam and Eve. Okay, and out of the garden, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Abel gets cursed. off to those other lands. He goes and marries and creates a whole new nation of people. So in verse 25 of chapter 4, it says, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son named him Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me. This is her, Eve talking. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then men began to call on the name of the Lord. So Adam knew his wife again. She bore a son. They had many children. It's going to say that in chapter 5, verse 4. And it says, then they had many sons and, many sons and daughters. So Eve named her third son Seth, meaning granted or appointed, because she saw him as the replacement for Abel, because she thought Abel was going to be that promised savior of Genesis 3:15, but he didn't last long. So we now see, and here's where we're seeing recognition from Adam and Eve that Cain killed Abel. Because I was saying back in chapter 4, God's doing the cursing and all that stuff, but you didn't see anything from Adam and Eve, but it comes, later in the chapter. Now I've got a note there at verse 26, which said, and as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then men began to call on the name of the Lord. I made a note here that it's a strong indicator that the original family was monotheistic, that they believed in a God, a one God. People think that all these people come out of all these, polytheistic tribes, who have many gods, and they're sacrificing to this God or that God. But here with the first family, looks like anyway, that men began to call on the name of the Lord. Like they know that there's a one God. There's so many places that we see. I think we mentioned last week that it said that the son of Cain, whoever that was, built cities. We see people are a bunch of cave dwellers back then, and that they're hunters and gatherers. The man goes out and kills whatever, saber-toothed tiger or whatever, and he drags them back to the cave for the little woman to cook up for. This said from Cain's family, they made cities. And then the next generation was we saw how people were farming and stuff like that. So when people talk about how primitive early man was, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible sounds like, I made these people pretty smart. I've always said Adam was the smartest person in the world, ever. Okay, because God gave him everything that he needed. Like that, and then we've kind of evolved down to where we are now. We do our hunting at McDonald's. What's that? No, that's what I say. He named all these things and stuff like that. But anyway, so I think that it's interesting that that they called on the name of the Lord. And then
kind of evolution,
we went backwards. In fact, I saw a cartoon thing. Have you ever seen what do they call it? The Ascent of Man, where it's kind of a hunched over chimpanzee, and then it's a greater ape that's standing taller and then pretty soon it's a man walking. Anyway, and the last one there is this guy with long hair and a dress. And the one right before him turns around and says, turn around, something went wrong. Anyway. So we go into chapter 5, and these are the genealogies. Okay, so got the title on that first one for those first 5 verses to be the genealogy of Adam, and it says this was the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So we bid a fond farewell. Yeah, I know. So we did a fond farewell to Adam. I mean, here the story's pretty much been, Adam since the very end of chapter 1, into the beginning of chapter 5. What? Yeah. You don't know. Well, we'll find out more in the genealogies. So, and in the note there, it says this is the genealogy of Adam. There's good reason to believe that this is the end of Adam's direct account, which was preserved and passed down to Moses, who acted as the editor. We talked way back in the introductions to Genesis, how all these stories got down to Moses, because Moses is 2,000 years later. But these guys write the stories, they have the accounts, they're preserved by God. But then, Adam's laying there on his deathbed, it's just a cough. I'll be better pretty soon. I got another 1,000 years in me. But he says to Seth, here, this is the account. Seth preserves it. And we'll see in the genealogies that Seth and Noah, I think Seth died right before Noah was born. So those generations really, lap over. All Noah's got to do is the account from so-and-so, the account from so-and-so, bring them on the boat. Put them in the ship's safe, go, and then when they get off, here, let all the animals out, clean this place up. Oh yeah, let's not forget the genealogies. All right, do the microphone.
It says that God created man he made him in the likeness of God, but then, and that was Adam and Eve were created in the image of God, but not Seth. Seth was created in the image of Adam.
Oh.
So that is the way that sin was transferred from one generation to the next.
Lesser quality, So is man today made in the image of God? Or is man today made in the image of Adam?
The image of Adam.
But then we do see other places where it talks about being made in the image of God. We see it in Genesis 9 when they get off the boat. When they get off the boat and God in chapter 9, I think it is, and God's starting to give laws for mankind and says that, you shall not take another man's life, because if you do, then your life will be required of you because man's made in God's image. So it gets a little confusing there. I think that the, and I'm making this all up in my head. No, but I think that the image of Adam, made in the image of Adam and in his likeness, talks about being made in the image of God, but that image is broken. So we still have a spark of that image of God in us. It makes us human. It is broken. Lida. You need a little microphone. No, the mic, is that the microphone one? Yeah.
Adam and Eve sinned. So sin was passed down, and I can see that not being in the image of God. So that's what I think. And
Yeah, well, I don't remember when we discussed the image of God of what it actually was. And I don't think we know exactly what it is. We just know that it's good. It's not a physical image of God because God doesn't have that physical body like that, but it's probably something about his nature, and then it gets broken. Andy. Well, we know where conscience comes in, and that God has put his law on all man's hearts. So we have his law in his heart, so we know when we break God's law, and we suppress it, and we make excuses for it, and we say, yeah, but if God really knew, God really, and that's where people say, well, God knows now. I know, that's why he's condemning you. So again, we only have what we're given. So we do the best stuff we can. But yeah, Ray's point is that there is a difference. The way that Seth was created is different than the way Adam and Eve were created. And then that line comes down through us. So, let's see. And he called them mankind, the human race. Mankind was given the name of man by God from the beginning. It's not sexist or gender biased to call the human race by a general heading mankind because God does it. God wants to call it mankind. Who are we to say, well, we got to send God through some of those sensitivity courses, so that he'll know what 21st century people are like. And some of the stuff that we talk about or we joke about, or people say, we got to be, they don't call it gender inclusive in the Bible. It's not gender neutral either. But, where they translate some of these Bibles and they take out, the various pronouns and replace them with gentler words and stuff like that. But I mean, if in the original language, that's what it means, that's what God meant it to mean. At least that, anybody have a different opinion of that? Now, if the translations are wrong, I mean, if we can go back and look at the original languages and have people who can read them with a mindset that's kind of neutral to that. I mean, if it did say something like people kind, but we said mankind because we're a patriarchal society. But then you could change that kind of stuff. But I don't know how much of that is in there. Well,
Maybe getting a little ahead to you, but from Adam to Noah, how many years is that?
about 2,000. Or no, I take it back. So probably 1,000. I don't know if I have that in my notes. I know I have it somewhere. Well, we're going to find out because maybe next week or the following, we're going to start connecting the generations, the genealogies, and see how we can timeless to go back to when was creation. Because if we know that Adam was created on the 6th day, automatically we know that we're in the year 930 when he dies, because that's what the Bible says, And we're going to see in these genealogies, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we're going to see in these genealogies when it says that so-and-so was 130 years old when he begat so-and-so. Okay? That doesn't even matter if he had kids before then. All we know is that point is he was this age when he begat this person, because that's this person who's going to begat the next person mentioned. So it doesn't even matter if there's people in between. Yeah, like that. And so you can start, measuring from that. So, and so we're gonna go into all these begots. He begot so-and-so, he begot so-and-so, he begot so-and-so. But the other words used in the other translations are begat, was born. So so-and-so was 130 years old when so-and-so was born, instead of when he begat, when fathered, had a son, had become the father, and in the Young's literal translation, they have begetteth. So that's what's that? Well, I've got, had a son, yeah, and he had, like that. So they all mean the same thing. But we're into the the begots out of the New King James. Sure, the King James is the same. We're so locked into some things in the King James Bible that the people automatically saying the way King James uses it. Although we would not talk about, like today, it's one of my granddaughter's birthdays. And I'm not going to post on Facebook that, hey, on this day, my son begot Jenna. we don't talk like, we don't talk like that. But in Bible terms, if we're talking about it, okay, we say, hey, you got him. Anyway. What's that? Yeah, I know. So anyway, so after fathering a number of sons and daughters, Adam died at the age of 930. And then let's see. My next note here for myself was what Ray had brought up about the likeness and image of, whether it was of Adam, or of God, of Adam, and stuff like that. So we already discussed that. But anyway, the big thing is he had sons and daughters like that. And for all those years, another 800 years, had sons and daughters. I mean, the world's populating really quick at that time. And I guess that Eve may have been a little worn out. I don't know. I don't know how many she had, but what's that? So anyway, so the daughters became wives for the sons of Adam. And and that intermingling of the people, or the interbreeding, or whatever. But the gene pool was a lot more pure back in those days. Hadn't had time to, whatever the gene pool does. I don't know why interbreeding with close relatives is a problem. Never understood what the genes, DNA does, or why. Yeah. I mean, just if you pick up a lot of the recessive genes, I don't know. I just don't know. I didn't give Arlene the microphone. She didn't get enough air.
A service this morning where Jacob married his niece. I mean, did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Both nieces.
Yeah. So even 1,000 years later, yeah.
So what?
So even 1,000 years later, they were still doing it because it didn't become an issue. Wasn't an issue at all until Sinai. With the 10 Commandments and with the giving up the law, 613 commands. It was never an issue until that point. So we might as well go along with, okay, God foresaw the problem of interbreeding after that. He may have kept the interbreeding while they were in Egypt, just so that they didn't mix the genes. Yeah, contend quickly. Yeah. But then we get better because we have a savior. Okay, so so in verses 6 through 20, we have the first list of the begots. Okay. Anybody want to tackle the names, or I'll do it? You want to tackle the names? Okay, here comes Hudson, 6 through 20. You can read the big print if you want on my sheet.
I'm going to read from the message, okay? You guys got your copy that he's written out here.
Yeah.
When Seth was 105 years old, he had Enosh. After Seth had Enosh, he lived another 807 years, having more sons and daughters. Seth lived a total of 912 years and he died. When Enosh was 90 years old, he had Canaan. After he had Canaan, he lived another 815 years, having more sons and daughters. Enosh lived a total of 905 years and he died. When Kenan was 70 years old, he had Mahalaleel. After he had Mahalaleel, he lived another 840 years, having more sons and daughters. Kenan lived a total of 910 years and he died. When Mahalaleel was 65 years old, he had Jared. After he had Jared, he lived another 830 years, having more sons and daughters. Mahalaleel lived a total of 895 years and he died. When Jared was 162 years old, he had Enoch. After he had Enoch, he lived another 800 years. Having more sons and daughters, Jared lived a total of 962 years and he died. When Enoch was 60.
Well, let's stop there just for a second, okay? So, yeah. So you don't read, it's really funny because you don't read anybody about, and Jared had so-and-so at this age, and he lived another 23 years because he got eaten by a lion. You don't have those. Maybe those are the people whose genealogies we don't read about. But see, the genealogies, such as these, are important for ancient peoples. We don't keep genealogy today. I mean, people play around with genealogy, but we don't keep genealogies because we don't have to use them to, one, show who we are, what family we are from, what privileges we might have, what responsibilities we have. Well, the Mormons do, but the Mormons do it for a different reason. I think we talked about this on Friday. The Mormons do it because they need to know who the people are who need to be baptized after they're dead, who weren't baptized during life. They don't keep them to show their royal pedigree and stuff like that. They do it to baptize for the dead, for those who were not baptized during the life. Because to become a good Mormon and to be admitted to the church, you have to be baptized. Because to be admitted to the church, which is what gets you to the highest heaven, to be with Father God and Mother God. Pardon? Well, they may baptize them in the right name, but the names don't have the right people. But we'll save that for Master's name. Okay.
They have.
Yeah. We'll talk. You come to Master's meeting to talk about that. So, the people lived. We talked about the long lives. And I got this note in here. I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but you had that water canopy over the earth that didn't burst until the flood, so that may have kept out the ultraviolet rays. Things that make our skin look the way it looks. And also that God never meant man to die. God made man, didn't make him to die, you know? So he's made with good parts. He has this kind of everlasting quality to him. So if you're never supposed to die, and then God says on this day you will surely die, and you only live to 930, that must mean that, well, that was a short life compared to if you were supposed to live forever. So it's a matter of, perspectives. I think that's two reasons why these people lived so long, was that the environment was great and that they were made great. They weren't made with any, any defect. Pardon? No global warming. No, when you stop and you think about it, they had no, who knows what we've got in our genes that we have inherited down through the last 10 generations that killed our great-great-grandparents, killed our grandparents, killed our, and will kill us. Some defect in our genes that's been passed on. I was at the doctor a couple of weeks ago, new doctor, so I had to fill out the paper. And you ever did? It's like, send it to me. Anyway, but you got to fill it out, but they want to know your family history. Why would they want to know my family history? Yeah. No, but it's because there might be something in your family history that has killed your last several ancestors, and they may want to look for that in you. That's right. Oh, no, I have no problem with doctors guessing, because a lot of it is guesswork. They go by what you tell them. He tells them, what are you here for? And we tell them, well, we may not be telling them right. We're telling them about what we kind of have indigestion. I have indigestion. Well, I guess that could mean a whole bunch of things. Your gut's broken open. And wait, lighter was supposed.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I got a genealogy from City of Hope. I was disappointed because it wasn't a complete. But so mine was just medical.
Right.
So, but I got melanoma in my family. My mother had it, but I never had it.
Well, it's there's a whole bunch of all I'm saying is that's why these people lived a long time. They didn't have that. There wasn't enough time for it to enter into the system. And they were all vegetarians. Last thing. Oh,
I was just gonna say the previous industry I worked in, we called it garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
Give them bad stuff, they're gonna get stuff right.
yeah. Well, they can make you live a long time, but you step out in the street and get run over by a beer truck. You lived healthy and you got run over by a beer truck. I mean, what are you gonna do? So anyway,
AG, G,
oh, go ahead.
how much did the sons of God coming down and contaminating humanity have to do with the lessening the amount of time that people had on
Well, let's
earth?
wait till we get to chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
Huh?
I thought it was before the flood.
It is. Chapter 6 is before the flood. And it's the beginning of chapter 6. But you make the assumption that the sons of God came down. That's a whole different thing, which may be. It's one of the things. Anyway, but I don't want to get people confused about that yet. We'll confuse them later. Okay. So, so let's get into Enoch. Hudson, you want to still read 21 to 28?
When Enoch was 65 years old, he had Methuselah. Enoch walked steadily with God. After he had Methuselah, he lived another 300 years, having more sons and daughters. Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked steadily with God, and then one day he was simply gone. God took him. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he had Lamech. After he had Lamech, he lived another 782 years. Methuselah lived a total of 969 years in his body. When Lamech was 182 years old, he had a son. He named him Noah, saying, "This one will give us a break from the hard work of farming the ground that God cursed." After Lamech had Noah, he lived another 595 years, having more sons and daughters. Lamech lived a total of 777 years.
Okay, well, let's stop with Lamech. What verse were you on?
That one more line.
Okay, go.
When Noah was 500 years old, he had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That was the end of 5.
Hey, Gene,
Yes, sir.
Google says 1,656 years between Adam and Noah.
That's it, 2000. Yeah, I know. Okay. So here's the thing. So we got this guy Enoch. He comes along, and what did I just set my paper aside. It said that Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. Now he's one of the earlier ones to have kids. 65. I mean, we're talking teenager here, Okay. And so he has the longest living guy. Methuselah, that was it, 969 years, something like that. Yeah, so I find that interesting. So he does that, and then he was let's see, I lost my place there. So it says that all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. What does everybody think that means? Were you gonna say something, Drew? Oh, yeah. My title of that section is, what is it, the first man to get out of here alive? Yeah. I mean, you just wonder what that means. I mean, is he just walking along and poof? Was he sitting? Was he in prayer? Whatever. And when it says that he was, what did it say? It says he walked with God. Pardon?
Steadily.
Steadily with God. I mean, that means that he was faithful. He wasn't on and off. His mood probably didn't dictate, if he was mad at God that day or questioning. There's something different. We don't know what it is because it doesn't say. We don't know what it is, but there's definitely something different. Well,
the fact that they say steadily with God makes it different.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is we don't know what that steadily with God means.
I do.
Oh, well. Well, yeah, but you do from experience. The rest of us haven't lived your experience. No, but I'm just saying we don't know what that means. Does that mean that he prayed 5 times a day? Does that mean that he
Once a day? Well,
and that's what Paul says. Paul talks about being in prayer steadfastly, like that. It's just that, here's what I'm saying. We don't know, so we can't emulate him. We can take our best shot. And usually we guess wrong. Because what we usually think is, well, what would please me is probably what would please God. And it doesn't. So Enoch's son Methuselah lived 969 days, the oldest human on record. And this will go back to when people talk about the 1,000 years in the book of Revelation. And for those who've been around, I talk about the 1,000 years, just meaning a long time, the amount of time that you can't really calculate. And that when it says God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, that number is just 1,000 because no man has ever lived to be 1,000 years old. Methuselah gets the closest at 969. Just 1,000 becomes. You're gonna say something? No. Anyway, so he's the longest living character. The Bible records that this is good. Bible records that no other achievement of Methuselah, even though he lived almost 1,000 years, it doesn't say anything about him. It says that's the old thing on your tombstone. It gives your birth, and it gives your death, and that dash in between is your life. That's all. That's all it is. Pardon? Yeah. No, that's your life. So here you got the guy who lives here in the Bible story. In the Bible story, I'm sure Methuselah did a lot of good things, probably. But it doesn't mention a single thing, about him. And so there's a lesson here. As much as all of us would like to live long lives, in the final analysis, it's the quality, not the quantity of our lives that matters. Moses lived 1/8 as long as Methuselah, but he had a special quality to his life that you got not just chapters written about, you have books written about him. And then you've got him mentioned in almost all the other books. So just when we get into these long lives, it's like, well, yeah, why can't I live long lives? Pardon? Yeah.
What about Enoch? He was taken.
He was taken. He's one of 2 guys recorded, 2 humans who never died. Elijah is the other one, taken up in that chariot of fire. I got it listed there, 2 Kings.
The lesson there is to walk with God. It's going to be an easier time.
Well, I don't know about an easier time, but
Shorter.
no, because I don't know that Elijah had it easy. Elijah had it pretty rough. I mean, he was always on the run.
After 365 years, he's got a good long.
Well, Enoch, we're talking about there. Yeah, we don't know anything. We don't know anything about.
Well, Dave, where do you think the idiom "only the good die young" came from?
Were you gonna say something, Ray?
Well, the thing that I see is, starting back with Abel, that they were deep in their faith. The same thing with Enoch, that he was deep in his faith. And then God took him up. The same thing with you pick up with Noah, that Noah is deep in his faith, that he walked with God. God thought he was righteous. And, that's why he was saved. So all of these people, even the same thing with Moses, they were deep in their faith.
But it's not common.
No, it's not.
Yeah, because you got Noah and his family, and then you got the rest of mankind wiped out.
Well, I mean, God was available to Seth and all these other people too, but they weren't as deep in their faith as Enoch was.
Obviously not, but I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't. If anybody knows what that, besides Hudson, because he's got personal experience. Does anybody, we don't know what the quality was of those people, other than they probably did it better than us. Well, that's the only thing I can think of. Are there people today? I don't know. I don't. Sorts of people disappear today. We blame it on UFOs. So. No, but does anybody have an idea about that? About what constitutes being faithful enough to be taken by God before you die? Pastor does.
Well, mine comes from the study Bible note on my phone. It says that the word "walked" is the Hebrew word that's used has meaning of intimacy with God, as intimate personal relationship with God. And what exactly, how to describe that? It's maybe hard to describe with words, right? So,
Yeah, and we don't know. And does that mean that only those two people were that close to God? Are we given any command, or I shouldn't say a command, are we given any promise that if we walk that close with God, that we don't have to go through that? I mean, yeah.
Maybe if they,
Yeah.
that,
Well, yeah, it obviously is faith. It's just a matter of how you quantify that, what quality. See, now, we're promised we have a promise not to experience second death. That's through faith in Christ because of what he does. So that's I'll take that. We're gonna pick and choose. I guess I'll take that one.
You also have those that are elect, and you also have those that are predestined. That God has already chosen since the dawn of time.
Well, I don't know that he's shown them. It's that God knows
Yeah,
who the elect are. I mean, my thought is that everybody that's saved is the elect because Jesus is the elect. If we're in Christ, we're in the elect. So, I mean, that again, how do you figure out if you're elect? Those are the things that God knows we don't know, and I don't think that we can emulate because we don't know what it is that those people did for it. Okay, let's move on. Let's where did we leave off? Okay, so we have Bible, we have scriptures that talk about that believers being alive when Christ returns won't face death. They'll be taken. That's 1 Corinthians 15, where it talks about the resurrection. Because that's the question, is that, yeah, we know about those who have died and that their bodies will be resurrected. But what about those who are still living at that? And it says they'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye and raised. Pardon? Well, I think that it's of the faithful. But you see, now, what our evangelical dispensationalist friends have done, they don't see that as resurrection. They see that as a rapture. That happens 7 years before Christ returns. Christ doesn't come to the earth, he's in the sky, and he takes the church. And I've always tried to argue with them. I haven't convinced the one yet. Is that all through the Bible it talks about resurrection of the body. All through it talks about resurrection of the body. It never talks about a resurrection. So when the people in one of those Thessalonians, they ask, well, what about those still living? They say, well, that's Paul teaching on the rapture. And so why would they ask a question if they haven't been taught on the rapture? They're talking about the resurrection. Talking about the resurrection at the end of time. But anyway, so in 1 Corinthians 15, 51, 52 talks about it, and 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17, if you want to read those, about how you're going to end up not dying and being with the Lord in the meantime. So now Enoch was a man of great faith. This goes back to Hudson's, okay? I need to give Hudson credit. Because it says in Hebrews 11:5, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. See, so we don't find that from the Old Testament text. We find that from the New Testament when they're talking back to what happened. That's why we use the New Testament to interpret the Old Testament. And then also, Enoch was Noah's great grandfather. And they both enjoyed a close relationship with God. So it talks about Noah's relationship with God, 6 months. So Noah was the first recorded preacher. Okay, I mean Enoch was the first recorded preacher. Now we read all that we're going to read about Noah. The words that say that he was the first preacher. It says it in Jude, which only has one chapter. It says, now Enoch, the seventh from Adam. Let me say something. Where it says the seventh from Adam. See, people like to say you can't measure the age of the earth by following the genealogy. They go because there's gaps in the genealogies. I don't know how they know that. But they go, there's gaps in the genealogy. But this says, now Enoch was the seventh from Adam in the New Testament. That's written by Jesus' brother, Jude. Okay. So look at it. Seventh from, it said, prophesied about these men also, saying, this is where he's talking about the people at Noah's time. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all. But that's what the New Testament says that Enoch preached back in the old time. Let's see, what do we got here? Noah and the sons of God. Well, let me say one other thing about the genealogies. What's the key phrase in the genealogy? We probably read 20 pages. I mean 20 guys. Huh? And he died. You know, every one of them. Well, except for Enoch. I mean, it's because I think what it's saying is, well, it's saying, and he died. But one thing is that it's saying all these people don't get to see the promise. All of mankind has died without seeing the promise. Moses died without getting into the promised land, even though the promised land was promised to him. Yeah. We all die. At least these people. And I think that he's making it, says, he was begotten. He lived this long, he begot others. Then he lived a total of this time, and then he died. You know, I think, because a lot of times we just read over that kind of stuff. We don't stop to ponder what's God saying there. Well, it was actually an action against God because he didn't trust God, like that. But I'm just saying that even Moses didn't get to see the promise. Nobody got to experience the promise. Adam and Eve didn't get to experience the promise, and the promise was made during their time. And so it says, and he died. So that's still seeing. It's still there. They're still there. Testament seeds. Right. No. Right now they have. At least with the coming of Christ, they did. Up until Christ came, they didn't. Because then they were waiting in a place of the dead. So and he called his name Noah. The next thing. So then he called his name Noah, saying, this one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of his hands because of the ground which the Lord cursed. And he begot Noah. Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 700 years, 775 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old. Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We'll stop there. Pardon? I don't think so. But you don't know because it doesn't say.
Because they all came in that same year.
Yeah. Anyway, so the point is now we got Noah, and we're going to find out that Noah finds favor with God, and he's got his 3 sons, and they're going to marry 3 women, and then Noah's got his wife, and that's all that's going to be faithful in the world. Like that. I don't know if anybody's, I'm sure somebody has projected out, even just based on the timeline and this and that, how many kids you could have and you're intermarrying and this and that, how many people were on the earth. And I'm sure I can find it somewhere. I could probably find a dozen, you know, that the projections, but the thing is, pardon? Yeah, no, but the thing is like, how many, you know, how many people could be born in a, which is like 1,600 year period? That's a whole bunch of people that can, you know, probably been born. You know, I know that Answers in Genesis does a thing, is trying to figure out, so the earth destroyed restarts with 8 people. Could it be this population that it is now in that amount of time? And they roll it all back. At least they come up with the right numbers to say, yeah, no problem.
It said that Adam and Eve could have had 101 children, given their lifespan and 9 months for gestation period.